All right. Good afternoon. Hello again. Everybody who was here before, hi. And those of you who are joining us for the first time, thank you for joining for this session. We will be sharing a deep diving into the second principles of data mesh over here and showing you a little bit of practitioner view of how to go about doing it. There might be X number of different ways, but this is one of the ways that we are doing, and it's working. So before that, let's look at who will join me for the presentation. So I'm presenting here as head of BI and analytics for Roche Diagnostics. Today I'll be joined by Guy Adams from DataOps.live. He's the CTO there and partner in crime in bringing a lot of things to life. And he tried to make coffee today, but he will stick to DataOps today for the work. And also I have Paul Rankin with me. He's the guy who makes things happen. So he's leading the platform products for Roche Diagnostics, which are the core enabler for making data mesh possible for us. So let's start with the vision. This is a very simple statement that the company has, which is doing now what patient needs next. Very powerful, very simple, and this is what makes me come to office literally every day. Based on that, you can also see on the top left side what our division wants to do, which is about innovating diagnostics, shaping healthcare, and changing lives. Our team also came up with our vision to support that, which is about data and analytics products to maximize the outcomes for customers and patients. And that's where this whole data mesh thinking and approach comes in. You heard about monolithic architecture. This is one example which we had almost 3 years ago, which was in the making for past 15 plus years. Our data was flowing from every other practical physical server in the company before it generates any value. And it's completely on-premise, legacy infrastructure. You can see some of the pain points that we had on the right-hand side as well. Our customers, end users were unhappy. We had maximum releases like 3 months. Once a release, 3 months. We have number of major incidents, and neither the team was happy, neither the business team was happy. So we needed to think about what are we going to do differently. And that's where this whole thinking came in with the quote from Albert Einstein. He doesn't talk about data mesh, but he does talk about insanity. So it's literally, when I was tasked with the BI and analytics strategy, first question came to us as a leadership team was, are we going to do another data lake? Are we going to do another data warehouse? And the answer was no, we will not. We are going to do something differently. We are not going to build something that we have done in past on-premise, and we will just repeat it on the cloud. No, that would not make any difference to us. And that's what we did, and that's where our journey started. I will not go into the principles of data mesh, but I call them this mind, body, heart, and soul. And today, the team will show you and double-click on the heart, the second principle of data as a product or data products. How do you make them? How does that data ops look like for those developers, those data engineers, those business and IT people in the data product teams? Now, with that, let me hand over to you, Paul, who will talk you all the real stuff that is happening on the data product team side.
Excellent. Thank you, Omar. So when I met Omar about a couple of years ago, we were having a discussion, data mesh came up, all the capabilities that we needed for, really to make something new happen. Omar told me, we need DataOps. Yeah, 2 years ago, nobody had a clue what DataOps really meant. Yeah, it started to be a word that was getting bandied around. Everybody was familiar with DevOps, but DataOps, yeah. What was DataOps? Before we really looked into it, we had what was known as our CI/CD pipeline at the time. So we had GitLab, we had an Ubuntu runner, we had a Python SDK that was developing and releasing all of this through the environment. It was working. It was pretty much sellotaped all together because every time you would release, there would be something wrong. Yeah. So, we had what we knew at the time. And then when we decided to follow our data mesh implementation, this is the architecture that the data mesh. You'll see it in the book, and all of you who has the book will be very familiar with it. We're going from a centralized development, release, orchestration team to now every domain that's building data products has to be able to do this, all the capabilities. And if we go to the next, this is the capabilities, and when we started talking to DataOps, the company, they came in and we said, this is what we need, yeah, really for the capabilities for our distributed architecture. We need agility for our developers so that, as Jamak says, you know, developers don't need to code everything themselves. Yeah, the vanilla developer should be able to interact with, you know, APIs, SDKs, YAML files, etc., to be able to do this very easily. Orchestration, we need something that orchestrates everything, not just a little part, not just this part, but everything. Yeah. Automated testing, obviously we need that important, and just in clear directions. Yeah, this is how to do it. Your vanilla developer comes in, boom, 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 it's done very quickly. Yeah. So what we started with is something like this. This was our capability journey, if you like, in Roche. Omar sat and discussed what capabilities we really needed, yeah, for a very long time, over and over and over again, many iterations, and these are the core capabilities we came up with at the start. Yeah, there's a lot more, and you'll see later, but this is what we said to DataOps guy and Justin and the guys that came in. This is what we want to do just at the start. Yeah, we want to have our release and orchestration with our existing code repository, yeah, which was clear. We don't want to do a little bit of data modeling, data transformations, and we want to orchestrate some ingestion, yeah? And this was the core, and Guy's going to now discuss how we managed to achieve that with DataOps, yeah?
Cool. Okay, so I think I've been in a number of the data mesh sessions this morning, and I think one thing to bear in mind, I mean, if you're out there and you're embarking on this journey, it could look a bit demoralizing. There's a lot of people talking about the challenges and the vagaries and all the excitement. I mean, excitement isn't a word that people tend to like to hear in a business context. You know, excitement is 3 o'clock on Sunday morning when everything goes wrong. So there's the risk that people go away with like, hey, this is really early stages. I'm going to have to solve all these problems myself. Actually, that's not true. And one of the reasons that we're here together is to say this is a solvable problem together. Not every element it was solved, absolutely. But what you're going to see here is a data mesh that's actually really working on the ground, not at its early stages, not taking its first infant steps, but it's actually been delivering value now for over a year. So this has been done, is actually implemented, and we're now very much in the optimization phase. It's all working. How do we kind of take those new steps to deliver the untapped value? So what we want to talk about here is to give a counterpoint to some of the earlier sessions today and say this is actually how we've built a working system on the ground. And ultimately, what we built for Roche, we can break down into kind of 4 areas. And these are, for us, the 4 key principles of DataOps. And I'll talk through them individually. The first one is automate. And this is really all about everything platform and infrastructure. So if you get a situation where any of your engineers, any of your practitioners are logging into production environments and running commands or changing configs directly, you've already lost the battle. Data mesh, at its heart, requires a fully automated delivery model. It requires that everything is version controlled, everything is sitting in a source of truth, and then you're projecting from that source of truth out to those environments. So that gives you all of your infrastructure and your configuration of your infrastructure. Then, as Paul said, we've got an orchestration piece. Everybody out there is going to have a set of tools. Some of them are shiny new tools you just picked. Maybe some of them are tools you didn't pick and your predecessor or your predecessor's predecessor picked, but you've still got to live with them. They're there. It'll take you a while to migrate off them. So most people are stuck with a combination of the new shiny stuff and some legacy stuff that they've still got to live with. But all of that has to be orchestrated. And even if you're planning to migrate away, the best way to do a migration of a technology is to start by orchestrating the old one and then over time incrementally replace it with a newer one. So that orchestration is, as Paul said, everything end to end. How do I source the data? How do I get it into my data platform? How do I do all my transformation of it? Ultimately, all the way up to the consumers. But it doesn't even end at the consumers. That's the end of the flow of the data. But what's critically important for DataOps and what underpins in many ways a lot of the principles of data mesh is what we do with the metadata. The flow of data is a relatively well understood problem. If you look at all the principles of data mesh, so much of it is about the metadata, the data about the data and what we do with that. So this third pillar, the test and observability, first of all, as Paul said, automated testing is critical. We'll see some, Omar mentioned in the last session, but if you're releasing 120 versions of a data product a month, you're either going to test that manually with an enormous group of people at an incredible cost, or you're not going to test it at all, which flies in the face of everything we're doing, or you're going to have automated testing. The last is the only practical one of those three. So automated testing is absolutely critical. But there's a wider observability piece, doing every part of that pipeline, where I got the data from, what it looked like, what I did with it, how I transformed it, how I enriched it, how I tested it, what those results were, is all an important part of that test and observability piece. And then what do you do with that data? That then goes back to the orchestration piece. We now need to push it into, for example, a data catalog, like a data.org, or in the case of Roche, it's a Calibra. So push that information, that metadata into the data catalog to make it available for business users. So those three pillars, which I'll talk a little bit more about, form the kind of the functional parts of the pipeline. But what was really interesting in the last session was the discussion of the developer experience, the data developer experience. This is something that we haven't talked about in the past. A data engineer just got on with it, and the experience is whatever the tool you're using gives you. Nobody's thinking about optimizing that data developer experience, and that's something that's critically important. And the principles of true data ops say, let's not try and invent a new developer experience. There's one already out there. It's been battle-hardened for 20 years in the software world. Let's take that software developer experience. Let's bring it to the data practitioners. We've got to make a few changes along the way because there are differences, but let's start with that as our founding principle, and that enables us to use a whole bunch of existing tools, technologies, and as Matt was talking about, a lot of people we're bringing in are not data engineers. They're people who've got software background. So if we follow that developer experience, we're creating a much easier path to bring these people into what we're doing. So those are kind of four pillars. If I just kind of give a little bit of an idea about what this looks like, and I'm not going to go into this in detail, but I just want to give you proof that this really exists. When we talk about automation, this is driving everything Snowflake. So the way that we do this, it's a completely declarative system. You define what you want your system to look like, you run a pipeline, and that's what you end up with. Now, there was some great discussions this morning about pipelines, and are they evil, are they not evil? Actually, what I would tell you is these are what we described in the last sessions as micro pipelines. This is not one big pipeline for the enterprise that's driving my enterprise data warehouse. What we're seeing here is one of 40 or 50 or 60 little pipelines that are attached to individual data products. Every data product has its own pipeline, its own schedule, its own release cycle, its own process. And that's minimizing that time to value that you need. You don't want to have to wait for an entire data platform release just to get one new feature in one data product. So that was what was being talked about in the previous session. Pipelines are absolutely a fantastic way of doing this, but they've got to be very small, very tightly scoped pipelines for an individual data product. So once we've got our automation piece in place, that means that all of our data environment is set up the way we need it to be. And that includes, by the way, our environment management. It includes how we manage our production, our QA, our developer environment. It includes the way that we're creating ephemeral environments for individual engineers to have ephemeral environment to go and test their changes on for an hour a day, a week. Then we move on to the orchestration piece. And in the case of Roche, there's a lot of Talon, but there's also Immuter, there's some custom code, there's Calibra in here. So this is daisy chaining together all of the pieces that are required to make that work end to end. We'll look at test and observe. So we've talked a little bit about this. The major piece of this is automated testing. So we collect test results, hundreds, maybe thousands of test results in the case of some data products. And if any of those tests fail, we stop the data pipeline. Why? Because we'd much rather the business users see a data product that's 15 minutes old that we know to be good than the data product that's 60 seconds old that we know to be bad. So this automated testing isn't just about producing a set of reports and red, green lights. It's actually about, it actually controls the deployment and the release process. And then finally, this is the developer experience. This is that environment management. This is that release process where we cut a feature branch. We let an engineer run it as fast as they like with this sandbox of configuration and code, a sandbox environment to test it in again. And then once they're finished, they merge up through the environment. It's exactly the way the software world's been doing for 20 years. So this whole developer experience is very, very standardized. And to the questions that came at the end of the last session, makes it very, very easy to hire new people into this because we're not trying to invent new concepts for them to learn. So that's given you a little bit of idea about how we implemented some of the very core requirements that Roche had. But once these were in place, it turned out that there was a lot more mileage. There were a lot more things that we could go after. So Paul's going to tell you some of the second round things that we looked at.
Great, thanks, Gary. Testing, good, thank you. So what we're going to have a look at now is really, yes, we'd managed to implement, as Guy said, the core functionality, the release, the deployments, a little bit of orchestration. What we now we're looking at, yes, we have pretty much our CI/CD distributed, but now what other capabilities do we need? Yes, we need to be able to automate absolutely everything from policies to metadata to even at a level of maybe ideation. When you're discovering, you're defining your data products, maybe at this time you want some orchestration in there to define your team members, to define your concept and your definitions of your data products. Everything from federated governance. You've heard a lot about governance today, one of Omar's favorite subjects. We need to be able to automate this governance. So all of these things we were now looking at, yeah? Nothing was out of scope. Nothing was off the table, basically. Yeah, this is how we look at our platform, right? Now, we look at it from capabilities, and a number of capabilities has a number of services attached to it. From a logical perspective, and looking at the data mesh planes, this could be, request access to a data product. This is a service that a developer needs to apply to allow somebody to request access, yeah? Things like evaluate fitness of a data product. Again, this is a service that a developer within a data product team needs to apply to be able to easily evaluate the fitness of a data product. All of these services, and we have probably over 120 different services identified within Roche for our data mesh. All of these need to be easily configured from a data engineering perspective. We have different personas. Let's focus on the data providers, which is essentially our development teams. And, we don't expect them to code all this from scratch. Yeah, we don't expect them to give them a Snowflake account, AWS account, and actually do all this. We, as a central self-service platform, need to provide these capabilities to our consumers, in this case the providers, to be able to interact with these SDKs, these accelerators, these components. So we, like Jamak says, we're not hiring hundreds of data engineers just for building a small number of data products. Yeah? So this gives you an idea of how we view our platform. Yeah? And at the bottom, this is obviously our technical plane, if you like, our technical layer. I'm not going to show you all of our technology. Obviously, the most important one is DataOps, but it just shows you that we do have a lot of techs that need to be orchestrated and as part of the complete pipeline. So remember this slide at the beginning. This is what we asked DataOps to do initially. We ripped through this with, we were very surprised how quickly DataOps did this, yeah? So we had all this, but now then we want to look at, you put some orchestration, some graphics on here, Guy, nice. So again, this is all the capabilities. This is our full capability journey. Everything from our data discovery workshops that we offer. Yeah, we want to have a look at the definitions, maybe orchestrate a data product publication within our data catalog, all the way from here right through to shopping, consuming, publishing, everything, absolutely everything, And so what I'm going to quickly show you, we're 10 minutes left, so let me take one of these examples and show you exactly all the way through how we did it. So, all that capability journey, we identify the services, the capabilities, the personas, and the planes, as you would expect. Let's take this first one, publishing and serving a data product. At the time of the build, you want to publish that to make it available to shop. You want to provide some metadata with it. You maybe also want to provide some policies to that data product. Yeah. This here, yep, and this is the same for every service. We define both from a logical perspective and a technical flow, yeah? And you can see here, DataOps is really the orchestrator and the executor of this whole process, as it is with pretty much all of our processes, I would say. And all we're expecting is the developer to choose the service, configure we call it the OM file, which is essentially a YAML file, yeah? Configure that to the services, and then every time the pipeline runs, yeah, this will update whatever it's trying to do. So in this case, it's updating the publishing, the metadata, if the description has changed, if the owner's changed, if there's been new tables, new fields, it will publish that every time to Calibra. Yep, this is our data catalog. So, and this is our policy part. So if they want to put a policy on it, they would add a part in the YAML file, add policies, boom. So that just gives you an idea of how we think of things and how we actually manage to execute them. So, Guy, I'm going to hand over to you to explain a little bit more. Yeah.
So as you saw from Paul, we started out with a pretty still significant scope. As Paul said, ripped through that very quickly, moved into all this advanced stuff. I'm going to just touch on 2 points, and I think they're, from having been on this journey together for well over a year now, I think the 2 hardest points. And that's why we're focusing on them, because I think they're the 2 things that if we could share, the biggest challenges we face and then how we face them, I think this is where the most value is. The first one is all about federated governance. Federated governance you will hear in every data mesh presentation around, and it's a brilliant 2-word description to a really complicated problem. How do I have all of these domain teams run at their own speed, do whatever they want, but still understand the fact that, this is a pharmaceutical company. They've got all sorts of regulations and requirements about what they can and can't do. So how do I square that circle? How do I allow people to be independent and run at their own speed and be agile and still keep all these corporate requirements? And that's one of the hardest things to do, and that's what federated governance is talking about. This is something we work very closely together to build this in DataOps, this concept of project inheritance. So what Roche did was, first of all, they built their center of enablement team. So, by the way, what distributed means when you talk about data mesh doesn't mean there's no central team. It doesn't mean there's no small group of people working together. It means that there's a small group of people who are a force multiplier for a much larger group of domains. So Roche have this center of enablement team, and they define the central policies, they define the structure that everybody else works under. And what they did was build a set of DataOps projects that then all of the other departments inherit from. So in one place, Roche can define, these are my guardrails, these are my central policies, these are my reusable objects. Because actually, federated governance implies a very sort of dictatorial, but a lot of this is actually about value and reuse. So defining all those in central projects and then distributing them down into the individual departments. And that's something that's kind of handled completely automatically, but then is also a fan back. So if you think of a great example, Roche have got 40 different departments. Does it make sense for 40 different teams to work out how to push data into Calibra? No, it's a massive waste of time and effort. So one team works out how to do it. They share that knowledge with the central team. The central team say, great, let's distribute that across all 40 departments. So that's a perfect example of where it's not just federated governance, but also reuse. The second piece I'm going to talk about is the non-technology piece, the people and process. So we've talked a lot about technology, and technology is a key piece. But the single biggest question I get from people when they're early in is, okay, that's great, but I've got to make these organizational changes. I've got to make team structural changes. How do I train people up? What do the job roles look like? What are the personas? How do people transition from the roles they're in to the new roles and things like that? And there is no magic bullet for this. But what I will say is we've been collecting our experience with Roche and a number of other customers for a few years now, and we collect them into this Center of Excellence blueprint. So it's a blueprint for any customer who's starting a DataOps or data mesh journey to say, this is a set of learned experiences from many customers that you can learn from. Use that as your starting point and then develop from there. And it's a way of getting kind of a year or two ahead in terms of maturity for organizational structure. And I want to just, if you're going to get your cameras out, do it now, because this next slide, if you want to know why you should do any of this stuff, this next slide will blow your mind. These are the Roche metrics that they've measured in terms of the changes they've got having been on this journey.
I thought you would say, okay, take your cameras out because I'm coming back, but okay. Yeah, but anyway, so not as interesting as I am, but let's look at the metrics. So we started in Feb, and somebody was asking earlier as well on the metrics. So you can see we measured some things in, not deliberately, but we know where they are right now. We have built the platform since 1.5 years. It was not like this since day one, but it was thanks to the consistent effort that people like Guy and Paul and their team have done to constantly grow as our data mesh journey grew. And this is something which all can take away as well. It takes just 6 to 8 weeks to get the first full vertical slice of the MVP of the data product out. That was not happening before. We were doing 6 to 9 months of POVs without anything in production, without anything in the hands of the end users. Now, it takes just 2 weeks to onboard any brand new team. They are able to deliver their first slice in 6 to 8 weeks. That's amazing speed at a company of our size. We have at least 40 plus actual teams working across multiple domains. That's a lot of different personas across the board who are using different capabilities of the program. Number of users of different sorts onboarded on the platform, that is growing. I think these are a few months old number, but oh well, it's more than this. Maybe we can add a plus sign next time. Our data volume is not that big as compared to big enterprises, but that I'm sure is not really a measure of success, because I can copy the data on any bucket in any blob storage, but it will be of useless value if it's not being used or insights are not being generated out of them. We have actual, genuine, certified data products with the full definition of data products published on our catalog, which are search findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, following all the FAIR principles if you follow that concept. Number of releases that I mentioned earlier. We used to have 1 release in 3 months if I was lucky. We are talking about 120 releases, and this is a number that DataOps platform, you can measure it from there, so it's not a manually counted number. We have integrated a lot of capabilities and services, as Paul was describing, and that's a ground reality. There is no magic bullet. You need to work through different set of tool chains, and you need something which can orchestrate around that and which can provide a unified experience to the team member. At the end of the day, it measures what we are doing in terms of value creation. We have already delivered significant business value in terms of top line and bottom line. We have saved costs, we have increased revenue, and this is just the first set of go lives of our products. So I think we are just on the last slide. You can just finish it. We have 1 minute to go.
Okay, so you've seen some incredible figures out there. I'm going to leave this up on screen because I'm going to have time to talk about it, some of the lessons there, but some just incredible figures there. Scale, 40 different teams running, 50 different data products, 120 releases a month, MVPs in 6 to 8 weeks rather than 6 months, $40 million worth of savings. You know, this is the reality after 18 months of work that Roche have achieved. So I know there's a lot of people who have questions for Paul and Omar. They very kindly agreed to come to the DataOps booth. So if you have questions for them or anything about DataOps or data mesh, please come down to the DataOps booth afterwards, get a cup of coffee, and we'll be happy to help you. Thanks very much.